What's up guys, I'm Shlok Chauhan, and today I'm going to be teaching you guys about DNA sequences and components. So, a brief overview. In this topic we'll be covering DNA and its components. You'll learn about what it is, what it's made of, what it looks like, and how it works. So I'm going to be including some keywords and concepts in the slide right after this one, and you'll want to know these if you're taking like a test or if you just want to get really well versed with just DNA. You want to know these terms and concepts, and then there's these 4 slides over here, which is going to be the bulk of the information that you need to know. It's what is DNA, what is it made of, DNA functions, how is DNA made and stored, and there will be some practice problems and example problems at the end for you to practice or just kind of test yourself. So this is the keywords and concepts. This may look like a lot. It's not really that much, because you're not gonna need to know these on like a daily basis. If you have a test coming up or something, or this may be stuff that you want to have down. Just recognize what nucleotides are, stuff like that. And by the end of this presentation, you will know what each of these things are to a certain degree, so that you can maybe take a test, you can explain it, you can take a quiz, tell your parents about it, whatever you want to do. So this is just for you to reference, towards the end. If you need to just kind of get a vocab list ready, then this is there for you. So what is DNA? DNA stands for deoxyriboic nucleic acid. That's a big confusing word, I know, but it's essentially your body's instruction manual. So your body has a bunch of cells. Your cells do a lot of functions. Most of them involve protein. Now your cells kind of need to know how to do those functions. They don't have this innate sense of I need to do this. They read basically a manual on how to do them, or an instruction, like a step-by-step guide, and that's what DNA essentially is. It tells your body how to make proteins, and that does determine your eye color, hair color, height, size of your nose even, and may even have a role in how you act in certain situations. Research is being done every day on just how certain behavioral traits are actually attributed to certain DNA patterns. Maybe your grandparents are really chill, relaxed in stressful situations, and unless you've been brought up in an environment that would cause you to be really anxious, you may have your grandparents' stress level management, purely because that's how your DNA coded it. So DNA does hold all the genetic stuff. Like, you might have your mom's eyes, that's because in your DNA you have your mom's DNA, and so that's kind of encoded into it. So that's why you have maybe your mom's eyes or your grandparents' nose or something like that. If you remember from your cells unit, all eukaryotic cells have a nucleus, which is where the DNA is stored. So that's just where it lives. The DNA strands have a shape of a double helix. What is that? So essentially, it's a ladder. There'll be a picture, graphic, something over here. Basically like a ladder that's been twisted on each end, so that one end has been twisted this way, the other end has been twisted the opposite way. And so it's just like this spiraling ladder, with the rungs essentially being the proteins and the nucleotides that we'll get into in the next slide. So that's what it looks like on its own when it's not been compacted into a storage thing. Now, what is DNA made of? DNA strands are made of a few different things. At the most basic level, all DNA is composed of a series of smaller molecules called nucleotides. So that's what I was just talking about prior. In the picture that's up here, you'll see these little the horizontal beams or something that are kind of the rungs of the steps of the ladder. That's the nucleotide. So each nucleotide is made up of something else as well. So DNA is made up of nucleotides. Nucleotides are made up of something else. They're made of 3 parts specifically. Nitrogen is base, so nitrogen-based molecule. Deoxyribose, and a phosphate region called a phosphate group, which is attached to the main sugar molecule. So attached to the main deoxyribose molecule. So on the left over here, you'll see basically this is a very kind of an easy to understand model of what each nucleotide is essentially made up of. On the right over here, these are all nucleotides. I'll get into exactly what these letters mean. So these things over here, there are 4 types of nucleotides. So you'll see, on the right graphic over here and on this little DNA graphic over here. And this one does actually show the spiraling kind of ladder thing really well. Adenine or adenine, however you want to say it, thymine, guanine, and cytosine. Those are essentially the 4 types of nucleotides in your body. Base pairs are just a pair of 2 nucleotides that are bonded to each other via a hydrogen bond. So make sure to know that adenine bonds with thymine, guanine bonds with cytosine. These bonds create the rungs of the ladder that you'll see in the middle graphic right on the presentation, or right here. While the alternating groups of phosphate and deoxyribose sugar molecules bond with one another to create a very strong backbone or side of the ladder. You can't have a wobbly-woo ladder. You need to have a strong side, stuff to hold on to. Essentially, that's what the alternating groups of phosphate and deoxyribose do. This phosphate backbone that you see in the graphic on the presentation and right here, that yellow band that's spinning around, that's the phosphate group, and that's really strong. That can't be broken apart. So, DNA functions. What does DNA exactly do? Now, DNA is it's really hard to rank importance in the human body because a lot of things are very important. DNA is the baseline of like importance. Like you need it to do so many things. So the order of or sequence of nucleotides within strands of DNA is what gives humans diversity. The reason that I look like me and you look like you is because different orders of like guanine and cytosine and adenine and all that stuff, they all are in different like sequences essentially. And that's why we have some similarities, some differences, because some of them overlap and some don't. A change in order leads to a change in instructions, which for example could lead to someone having blue eyes instead of brown eyes. You're basically the instruction manual says make some blue eyes instead of saying make some brown eyes, and that's what your body does. As we learned earlier, DNA contains instructions for organisms to survive, develop, and reproduce. To carry out these functions, DNA sequences must be converted into messages that can be used to produce proteins, which are the complex molecules that do most of the work in our bodies. And each DNA sequence that contains instructions to make a protein is known as a gene. You'll hear that word a lot when you come to the DNA unit, or if you just want to do anything that relates to DNA in the future. Gene, genomes, gene editing, gene therapy, all that stuff. That essentially just has to do with DNA sequences and, working with them. So how is DNA made and stored? Well, DNA goes through something called DNA replication. During this, DNA unwinds so it can be copied. Basically, it splits in half and then makes a clone of itself, which then continues the cycle until there's enough DNA in your body that it can wrap around the Earth 2.5 million times or reach the sun and back 300 times. That probably doesn't register in your head. That doesn't register in my head how far that really is. But that's how much DNA is required for you to be a normal functioning human, and that just shows how the storage process is going to be crazy. It seems insane that there's nearly 100 billion miles of anything inside your body, but it's true. But how does the human body store that much of anything, right, within itself? I'm only 5'6", but there's about 10 billion miles in mine. You might be like 4'1". There's still 10 billion miles. Your DNA goes through a process called DNA packaging. That sounds exactly what it is. The double helix strand meets some smart packing proteins called histones, which start the process of supercoiling. So the strands of DNA wrap or coil around the histones, allowing them to become very tightly packed nucleosomes. These nucleosomes then get stuffed into chromatins, which then become X-shaped chromosomes. That may not have made that much sense because a lot of things just happen one by one. But if you look at the graphic on the presentation or the one right here, you'll essentially see how the double helix strand meets these histones, right? And then it gets wrapped, and these histones essentially are just like, they kind of draw the DNA in and just wrap it around themselves multiple times. A group of these histones then become the nucleosomes, which then get kind of compressed into another thing called chromatins. So it's first DNA meets histones, which become packaged nucleosomes. These nucleosomes then get packaged into chromatins. These chromatins then make their way into a chromosome, which is that X-shaped thing that you see on the top of the graphic, and also you may have seen just in your biology studies. So that's actually why X-Men are called X-Men, because of their X-shaped chromosomes. They're unique and different from normal humans, which gives them their abilities. So in theory, if someone's chromosome was just right, like unique in a certain way, they could be given certain powers or abilities that are something that we would take out of a comic book. Now we have some practice problems here. So this is an example problem that you may see, like a free response type of question or just on like a regular old biology type of quiz test. So it's, how are DNA strands stored within the human cell? Well, the answer is already there because it's an example problem. But histones basically act as a spool. If you don't know what a spool is, basically something that just can help wrap something around for DNA strands to wrap around. This forms nucleosomes that group up and become chromatin fibers. These fibers then go into the X-shaped chromosomes, and this process is what allows for the storage of trillions of DNA strands. Now we got some practice problems. So take your time on these. I can wait, pause the video. If you're on the presentation only, just you have to double click to reveal the answer, the big middle circle. If you're watching the video, just wait and I'll just show you the answer. So just pause the video and then work on these. Alright, hopefully you have your answer locked in, A, B, C, D. It's just a single answer right now. So, which of the following sequences is complementary to the DNA sequence shown below? C, G, A, C, G, C, A, T, G, T, A, G, C, G, A. That's kind of hard to say. Hopefully you remembered, what cytosine goes with, what guanine goes with, adenine, and then thymine and all that stuff. And if you did, then you will know that it is, in fact, C. G, C, G, T, A, C, A, T, C, G, C, T. Wow, that's actually kind of hard to read. So, cytosine goes with guanine, adenine goes with thymine. Just once you get G, C, and A, T kind of down, that kind of becomes second nature to you, and you'll just be able to figure it out. Alright, next question. What is the type of bonding between two nucleotides? Time starts now. Alright, hopefully you have your answer logged in between A, B, C, or D. Answer is not A, sadly. D, hydrogen bonding. Hydrogen bonding is, these are covalent, ionic, and hydrogen are types of bonds. Maybe you learned them in your chemistry unit, or you already have. But hydrogen bonding is the one that is between two nucleotides, like adenine and guanine. It has to be hydrogen bonding because they're strong, but not so strong that they can be broken apart for like DNA replication. Because DNA replication has to split those nucleotides apart. Alright, third question. This may have two answers, may have one answer, may have no answer. I don't know. But what is the purpose of DNA? Pretty fundamental question. I hope you guys get this right. Alright, so hopefully you have your answers locked in. It is A and B. It acts as instructions on how to make proteins, and they may determine some certain traits about a person. They don't help blood flow throughout the body directly. I mean, maybe they can determine how your cells do it, but they don't actually like play that big of a role, at least not for this question. Final question, I believe. What are the DNA sequences that contain instructions to make protein known as? That's right, they're known as genes. Not like the genes that you wear, the genes. There we go. You'll hear a lot of gene jokes, probably by your biology teacher. I'm sorry, that just kind of happens. And that's all. Hopefully you learned something from this. I'd recommend, if you want to go back and like watch over this, or like at least go over the slideshow quickly and look at the page with the keywords and concepts if you want to ever review this, because that will probably just give you like a good kind of like, it'll make your brain remember everything, and it's just stuff that you might want to know for like a test or a quiz or something that's coming up, or if you just want to be a well-educated person on DNA, because it is a pretty fundamental thing in our body. You probably want to know at least something about it. And yeah, that's all I got for you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you learned something, and have a good day.